The year was 628, and the air was thick with the scent of impending war. In the Cirencester area, a battlefield awaited, where the fate of a kingdom would be decided. The West Saxon rulers, fierce and proud, were about to clash with the mysterious and powerful Penda, the king of Mercia. The Cirencester area, settled by Saxon colonists, was a prize that both sides coveted. The land was fertile, the rivers abundant, and the people, though Saxon, were ripe for control by a strong leader. Penda, a man of legend, was known for his cunning and his might. He had already made a name for himself as a ruler who would not be easily deterred. His eyes were set on expanding his realm, and the Cirencester area was just the beginning. The West Saxons, led by their own ambitious kings, were determined to hold onto what they believed was rightfully theirs. The tension was palpable, and the ground was soon to be stained with the blood of warriors. But the story of Mercia is not just one of battles and conquests. It is a tale of intricate politics, of kings and their subordinates, and of the delicate balance of power that shaped the landscape of early England. The Æthelwalds, a people with their own dynasty, found themselves caught in this web of influence. Their origins were murky, and some believed they were related to the royal house of Bernicia, but this was never proven. What was clear was that the Æthelwalds rulers, while maintaining their own line, were often under the watchful eye of the Mercian kings. The Mercian kings, such as Penda and his successors, had a unique way of managing their satellite provinces. They did not simply conquer and rule. They employed a system of indirect control. The Æthelwalds, for example, had to seek permission from the Mercian kings before making grants of land. The Mercian kings also had the right to grant land within Æthelwald's territory, except for the Shire of Winchcombe, which remained the preserve of the Æthelwalds kings. This pattern of control extended to other regions as well. The East Saxons, for instance, were encouraged to expand their influence into areas like West Kent and London, with the support of Mercian king Æthelred. The East Saxons were given control of these lands, but the Mercian kings retained the ability to grant lands within these territories, ensuring that their influence was always present. The South Saxons, too, found themselves under the watchful eye of the Mercian kings. King Æthelbald of the South Saxons was given control of the Isle of Wight and parts of Hampshire, areas that the West Saxon kings also desired. Æthelwald's marriage to a Wixian princess further cemented the Mercian influence in the region. Religion played a crucial role in this intricate network of power. The Mercian kings were generous patrons of religious houses, not just within their own territory, but in the satellite provinces as well. Monasteries like Medeshamstead, Peterborough, Much Wenlock, and Barking all benefited from the patronage of Mercian rulers. These religious institutions were often controlled by major aristocrats, many of whom were of royal birth, and the Mercians needed to win their favor to maintain their grip on the outlying areas. One of the most striking examples of this policy was the monastery of Bardney in Lindsey. When Æthelred abdicated in 704, he chose to enter this monastery, far from the heart of Mercia. This decision was not just a personal one. It was a strategic move to strengthen the Mercian influence in Lindsey, a province that had been detached from Northumbrian control by Æthelred's victory at the Battle of the Trent in 679. The promotion of saints' cults was another tool in the Mercian arsenal. Saints like Mildbar, Cynibur, and Cyneswith, all descendants of Penda, were revered in various parts of the kingdom. These cults served to reinforce the connection between the Mercian royal house and the people of the satellite provinces, binding them together in a web of shared religious and cultural identity. As the years passed, the power of Mercia continued to grow. In 704, Æthelred abdicated and was succeeded by his nephew Cenred. Cenred's reign was brief, and he too abdicated in 709 to become a monk. This paved the way for Ceolred, the son of Æthelred, to take the throne. Ceolred's reign was marked by personal excess and a lack of political acumen, but he maintained control over the Mercian satellite provinces. However, the seeds of discontent were sown. Æthelbald, who would succeed Ceolred in 716, was exiled and comforted by the monk Guthlac, who prophesied his return to the throne. The vision of a monk in Much Wenlock foretold the dire fate that awaited Ceolred, and these murmurings of discontent suggested that the pendulum of power was about to swing again, The year 716 brought a new era to Mercia. Æthelbald, descended from Eowa, the brother of Penda, took the throne. His reign marked a shift in the balance of power, as he and his successor, Offa, solidified their control over the kingdom. By the end of the 8th century, most of the peripheral kingdoms had been absorbed into Mercia, and the Æthelwixian royal family, though still in existence, was reduced to a subordinate position. The story of Mercia is a complex tapestry of power, influence, and strategic alliances. It is a tale of kings who used every tool at their disposal to maintain and expand their realm, and of the people who lived under their rule. As the sun set on the Cirencester battlefield in 628, little did anyone know that this was just the beginning of a long and intricate saga. In the 8th century, the kingdoms of Mercia and Wessex, ruled by the Mercian kings and the West Saxons, often found themselves at odds over a common border. This border, which meandered through the upper Thames, North Wiltshire, and Somerset, was a constant source of dispute. Both sides claimed victory at various times, and the land, along with its monasteries, frequently changed hands. One such monastery, Cookham in Berkshire, gives us a glimpse into the turbulent life in these border regions. In the late 7th century, Cookham was under West Saxon control, but King Æthelbald of Mercia took it over and granted it to Christ Church, Canterbury. However, when Æthelbald died, King Coenwulf of Wessex reclaimed the upper Thames region, including Cookham. Coenwulf even obtained the monastery's title deeds from 2 supporters, who had stolen them from Canterbury. This back and forth continued until 779, when Offa of Mercia defeated Coenwulf in a major battle at Bensington. Offa then took control of Cookham and many other towns, bringing them under Mercian rule. Despite Offa's victory at Bensington, it would be a mistake to think that he had complete control over Wessex during Coenwulf's reign. In 787, a significant meeting of the southern provinces, attended by papal legates, was jointly presided over by Offa and Coenwulf. This suggests that both kings had a degree of authority in the region. However, Offa's influence over Wessex grew after Coenwulf's death in 786, when Beorhtric became king. Beorhtric, who married Offa's daughter Eadba, was remembered unfavorably in Wessex for her tyrannical behavior, which might have been a sign of Mercian power in the kingdom. Offa's most notable conquests were the kingdoms of Kent and the South Saxons. In 764, Offa began his campaign in Kent, initially allowing local kings to rule under his authority. However, this arrangement was not stable, and Offa may have lost control in Kent between 776 and 784. By 785, he had regained control and ruled Kent directly through his ealdormen. His campaigns against the South Saxons in 770 and 771 were similarly successful. Offa allowed local South Saxon rulers to continue governing as long as they acknowledged his supremacy, but by the end of his reign, there were no known native South Saxon rulers left. Offa also expanded his influence over the East Angles. By the 790s, he was minting coins at the East Anglian Mint, and had the East Anglian ruler Æthelbald executed in 794. By the end of Offa's reign, Mercia had become a vast kingdom, stretching from the Thames to the Humber. It included Kent, which was ruled directly from Mercia, and other southern kingdoms that were under Mercian control, though some native dynasties, like those of the West Saxons, East Saxons, and East Angles, remained. Offa and his predecessor, Æthelbald, were keenly aware of their status as the dominant kings of southern England. They experimented with new royal titles, with Æthelbald sometimes being called King of Britain, and Offa occasionally using the title Glory of Britain. However, the most common title for both was King of Mercia, which accurately reflected their role in expanding Mercia's borders. The expansion to London and Kent gave the Mercians access to ports and trading links with Francia. Æthelbald controlled the tolls at London, and Offa's correspondence with Charlemagne, the Frankish king, often dealt with trade issues. Offa also minted coins, including the new penny coinage, at various locations like Canterbury, Rochester, and London. He even had coins minted for his wife, Cynethryth, with the title Queen of Mercia, which was unprecedented in England. Offa's reign was influenced by the Carolingian Renaissance, a period of cultural and religious revival in Francia. He was in regular contact with Charlemagne and his advisor Alcuin, and he received gifts from Charlemagne's treasure. Offa was also responsive to the expectations of a Christian ruler, cultivating the papacy and promising a yearly payment to Rome. He founded and acquired many monasteries, which he saw as personal possessions that could provide for his family. However, Offa's relationship with the church was not always smooth. In Kent, he faced opposition from Archbishop Eanbert, who resisted Offa's attempts to remove the native dynasty. Eanbert refused to crown Offa's son Egfrith, leading Offa to seek papal support. The Pope agreed to establish a new archbishopric in Lichfield, reducing Eanbert's jurisdiction and allowing Offa to have Egfrith crowned. In Mercia itself, Offa and Æthelbald left tangible signs of their power, particularly through the construction of Offa's Dyke and Wat's Dyke. These 150-mile-long earthworks were built to defend against Welsh attacks, and required the labor of thousands of Mercians. Offa also organized defenses against the Vikings in Mercia and Kent. After Offa's death, his son Egfrith ruled for only 141 days before passing away. Alcuin believed that Egfrith's death was divine retribution for the bloodshed Offa had caused to secure his kingdom. The experiment of crowning a designated heir was not repeated, and the practice of anointing kings on their accession became the norm. Despite Egfrith's short reign, Offa's legacy as a powerful and ambitious king continued to shape Mercia and the surrounding regions. The death of Egfrith in 796 opened up the throne of Mercia to a range of distant relatives, much like how Northumbria saw conflict over the throne in the previous century. Egfrith's successor, Coenwulf, who ruled from 796 to 821, was a very distant cousin with a genealogy that traced back to a lesser-known brother of Penda named Coenwulf. Coenwulf's father, Cuthbert, might have been the same ealdormen who served during Offa's reign. Upon becoming king, Coenwulf placed his relatives in positions of power. His brother, Cuthred, was made king of Kent and had the authority to mint his own coins. Another brother, Ceolwulf, became an ealdorman and eventually succeeded Coenwulf in 821. Coenwulf's son, Cynehelm, also known as Kenelm, was an ealdorman, and Cuthred's sons, Cynebert and Cenwald, were prominent figures in their father's charters. Coenwulf had several ealdormen in his court whose names began with Ceol, suggesting they might have been close relatives, though their exact relationships are unclear. Coenwulf's family also held significant roles in the church. His kinsman, Conrad, was the abbot of St. Augustine's in Canterbury from 802 to 823, and his daughter, Cwenthrith, was the abbess of Minster and Thanet, one of the wealthiest royal nunneries in Kent. The monastery at Reculver was seen as a family possession, and Coenwulf assigned Glastonbury Abbey to his son Cynehelm. These actions allowed Coenwulf to enrich his family and solidify their power. One of the most significant actions Coenwulf took was the establishment of a major monastery at Winchcombe, which he secured with a papal privilege, similar to how Offa had protected his family's monasteries. When Cynehelm was murdered, likely in 811, he was buried at Winchcombe and venerated as a saint. After Coenwulf's death, the rights over the monastery passed to his daughter, Cwenthrith, and then to her cousin Æthelfled, the daughter of Ceolwulf. Two other family groups vied for the throne in 9th century Mercia, favoring alliterative names and promoting their kin. The first group included three kings whose names began with B: Beornwulf 823-26, Bertwulf 840-52, and Burgred 852-74. While it's not certain they were related, the alliteration in their names and those of their kinsmen suggests a possible family connection. During Beornwulf's reign, a kinsman named Baldred ruled in Kent. Bertwulf had a brother named Bina and two sons, Bertfrith and Bertric. In Burgred's charters, witnesses included pairs of names like Bertic and Beornwulf, and Bertfrith and Bertric. There's a possibility that Beornrid, who briefly ruled after Æthelbald's death, belonged to this family as well. The third family was that of Wiglaf, who ruled from 827 to 829, and again from 830 to 840. Wiglaf was the only member of his family to become king, but we know of other relatives from the life of St. Wigstan. Wigstan, the son of Wigmund, Wiglaf's grandson, and Æthelfled, the daughter of King Ceolwulf, was murdered in 849 during Bertwulf's reign. Wygstein opposed a marriage between his mother and Bertfrith, Bertwulf's son, because Bertfrith was his father's kinsman and godfather. Bertfrith lured Wygstein to a meeting and killed him. Wygstein was buried in the mausoleum at Repton, where other Mercian kings and princes were interred, and a cult quickly developed around him. This event likely enhanced the claims of Wygstein's family, much like how Coenwulf had promoted the cult of Cynehelm at Winchcombe. The family of Coenwulf is the only one with a surviving genealogy claiming royal descent, but the B and Whig families might also have been related to the royal house. The life of St. Wygstein suggests a connection between these families. It's possible that several royal lineages existed because of Penda's and his son's practice of placing conquered provinces under the control of royal kinsmen. For example, Penda's son Merwal ruled the Magan seat and started a dynasty with names beginning with M, though this line seems to have died out in the early 8th century. In the 8th century, subkingdoms became ealdormanries, and while some of these families died out, others continued to hold lesser offices. The witness lists of charters from Æthelbald and Offa's reigns show many ealdormen with names like Beorn, Bert, Sen, Ceall, Cuth, and Wig, which were used by the 9th century kings and their relatives. Coenwulf's father, Cuthbert, might have been an ealdorman, and Coenwulf, Ceolwulf, Beornwulf, Ludica, and Burgred all served as ealdormen before becoming king. Despite the changing dynamics, Coenwulf 796 to 821 was just as powerful as Offa. When Offa and Egfrith died, Kent and East Anglia briefly regained independence. However, Eadwald of East Anglia's reign was short, and Coenwulf soon regained control. In 798, he recaptured Kent and brutally punished the native claimant, Eadbert Preen, by blinding and mutilating him. Coenwulf appointed his brother, Cuthred, as king of Kent, but took direct control again after Cuthred's death in 807. He also maintained influence over the East Saxons, who appeared in his charters with titles indicating their subordination. Coenwulf's relationship with Wessex was complex. The Hwicks, under their ealdormen, lost a battle to the men of Wiltshire in 802, when Egbert became king of Wessex, but Egbert's significant achievements came after Coenwulf's death. Coenwulf, like Offa, involved himself in Northumbrian politics and made a treaty with King Eardwulf. He also focused on his western border, campaigning beyond Offa's Dyke. He was preparing for another campaign against the Welsh, when he died in 821. Coenwulf initially tried to reconcile Kent with Mercian rule, appointing a subking and restoring lands to Canterbury. However, by the end of his reign, his relationship with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Wulfrid, was as strained as Offa's had been. Coenwulf claimed the royal monasteries of Reculver and Minster in Thanet, leading to a conflict with Wulfrid, who wanted to reform his diocese. Coenwulf suspended Wulfrid from office, and he was only restored after Coenwulf's death, when Ceolwulf I 821-23 made peace with the archbishop. Ceolwulf completed Coenwulf's campaign against the Welsh, and brought Powys under his control. However, he was deposed in a coup that brought Beornwulf, 823-26, to the throne. Beornwulf gained the support of Archbishop Wulfrid by siding with him in disputes over the ownership of Kentish monasteries. Baldred, who ruled Kent during Beornwulf's reign, was likely a kinsman with similar delegated authority to Cuthred under Coenwulf. However, the southern kingdoms saw an opportunity to reclaim their independence. Egbert of Wessex defeated Beornwulf at Ellendun in 825, and the West Saxons took control of Kent, the South Saxons, and Surrey. Essex may have also come under West Saxon control. The East Anglians regained independence, and Beornwulf was killed when he invaded their territory in 826. His successor, Ludica, 826-27, was also killed by the East Anglians. Wiglaf, 827-40, faced a similar challenge. In 829, Egbert of Wessex expelled Wiglaf and attempted to rule Mercia, but Wiglaf regained the throne. The West Saxons controlled the southeastern provinces, but the Mercians under Wiglaf and his successor, Bertwulf 840-52, remained in control of the Midlands and held land in Berkshire. The Welsh were a constant threat, and Viking attacks became increasingly severe. Burgred 852-74 formed an alliance with Æthelwulf of Wessex, sealed by his marriage to Æthelwulf's daughter, Aethelswith. Part of the agreement was that Berkshire would become part of Wessex. The two kings issued a compatible coinage and campaigned together against the Welsh. However, as Burgred's reign progressed, the Viking threat intensified. The Vikings wintered in Nottingham in 868, London in 872, and Lindsey in 873, and Burgred had to repeatedly pay them off. In 874, the Vikings wintered in Repton, a place of great importance to the Mercians. Burgred was expelled and sought refuge in Rome. Coenwulf II, 874–79, was a weak king, but his name suggests he might have been from the lineage of Cenwulf and Coenwulf. He ruled in western Mercia, issued charters, and shared a coinage with Alfred. According to Mercian sources, he was succeeded by Æthelred, whose origins are unknown. Æthelred closely associated himself with King Alfred of Wessex, marrying Alfred's daughter, Æthelbald, in 886–7. In West Saxon sources, Æthelred appears subordinate to Alfred, but Mercian sources suggest he had more independence. When Æthelred died in 911, his widow, Æthelbald, took over as the Lady of the Mercians, and led the Mercian army in cooperation with her brother, King Edward the Elder, to reclaim Mercian lands from the Danes. Æthelbald intended her daughter, Aelfwine, to succeed her, but Aelfwine was soon taken to Wessex by her uncle, Edward the Elder, and western Mercia came under direct Wessex control. Despite this, Mercian laws and customs remained distinct for some time. In the early years of the 10th century, the West Saxons, or the people of Wessex, were able to conquer Mercia, a powerful kingdom to the north. This wasn't something that was bound to happen. If it weren't for the Viking invasions, which weakened Mercia, the West Saxons might not have been able to take over. Back in the day, King Egbert of Wessex had a brief rule over Mercia, but the West Saxons didn't really make much of an impact on Mercia itself. The lands that Wessex took from Mercia were areas that Mercia had only recently gained control over. For example, Kent, the South Saxons, and the East Angles had been under Mercian rule for less than 50 years. The lands on both sides of the River Thames had been a point of contention between Wessex and Mercia since the 600s. Essex, or the East Saxons, was still an independent kingdom in the 800s, and even after parts of it were taken by Wessex, the East Saxon kings still had a strong connection to the Mercian court. The shifting control of these border areas was pretty common in Anglo-Saxon times. If the Vikings hadn't come, Mercia might have been able to spread its influence south again. The issues within the Mercian royal family, where different branches of the royal line were fighting for power, might have given the West Saxons an opening, but it didn't necessarily mean that the authority of the Mercian kings was weakened. When it comes to the church in Mercia, especially the bishopric of Worcester, there's a lot to talk about. The bishops of Worcester managed to gain control over many of the churches founded by the Wixian royal family. However, they had to fight off claims from the Mercian rulers, much like the archbishops of Canterbury did. The Church of Worcester was so vibrant that King Alfred of Wessex turned to it for help in reviving the church in Wessex. This shows that even though the West Saxons were making progress, the church in western Mercia was still doing well at a time when the church in Wessex was struggling. The kingdom of Mercia itself was a complex place. In the 600s, Mercia was more like a group of smaller kingdoms or provinces that were all under the control of the Mercian king. Over time, these provinces became more integrated into Mercia, and by the 700s, they were no longer described as separate kingdoms but as parts of Mercia, each with its own leader called an ealdormen. We don't know much about how these provinces evolved because there aren't many records from that time, and the Viking invasions and the later reorganization of the land by the West Saxons make it even harder to understand. One interesting group that appears in a charter from the 800s is the Thames. They had their own ealdormen, and their boundaries were well defined. Some people think that the Thames might represent an early subdivision of Mercia, maybe even the original homeland of the Mercians. But because we don't have any information about them before the 800s, we can't be sure. The boundaries of the Wix, another Mercian province, weren't fully determined until the 800s, which shows how complex the history of these areas was. The Mercian kings had a lot of power within their kingdom. They could demand a lot from the people, like housing and feeding royal officials and their animals, and even hosting foreign ambassadors. However, they had to rely on the ealdormen to manage the different parts of the kingdom. The ealdormen were powerful figures who could exact their own dues from the lands they controlled. Some ealdormen, like Broda, held positions similar to the Frankish mayors of the palace and had a lot of influence. Despite the power of the ealdormen, the Mercian kings, especially Æthelbald and Offa, were able to maintain control over the kingdom. However, there were always rival branches of the royal family fighting for power, which led to conflicts. Offa, for example, tried to ensure that only his direct descendants could become kings, but this didn't stop other relatives from making claims. Mercia expanded its control south of the Thames during the reigns of Æthelbald, Offa, and Coenwulf, but these gains didn't last. The methods used to control these new areas, like reducing the status of local rulers and using relatives as subkings, didn't work as well in the 800s as they did in the 600s. This might be because the administrative system of Mercia wasn't well suited to controlling such a large area. The power of the ealdormen grew, and this created tensions. Offa and Coenwulf's aggressive policies, like taking over monasteries for their own benefit, alienated the local aristocracy and led to conflicts with the bishops. The situation in Mercia became explosive, and civil wars gave the West Saxons and the East Anglians the chance to overthrow Mercian power. The loss of revenue from the subject provinces made it harder for any one branch of the royal family to assert dominance. The need for more revenue might have led 9th century kings to sell exemptions from royal services, which further reduced their power. The history of Wessex, the kingdom to the south, is closely tied to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a historical record that was compiled around 890. The chronicle starts with the arrival of Cerdic and Cynric in 495, and includes various earlier documents. The entries from the 600s and 700s are not as reliable as those from later periods, and the chronicle itself might have been edited or revised over time. The genealogies and regnal lists in the chronicle are important, but they can be difficult to reconcile with other sources. The chronicle is a key source for understanding the history of Wessex, but it's important to be careful with the information it provides. The entries from the 500s and 600s, for example, might be more legend than history. The chronicle became more consistent in the 700s, but there are still gaps and inconsistencies. The text we have today is a result of multiple copies and revisions, which can make it hard to determine the original content. Despite these challenges, the chronicle remains a vital source for understanding the history of the West Saxons and the evolution of their kingdom. The West Saxons, like the Mercians, faced internal conflicts and external threats, but they managed to emerge as one of the most powerful kingdoms in Anglo-Saxon England. The story of Wessex is woven through the fabric of early English history. It's a tale that begins with the arrival of two men, Cerdic and his son Cynric, who are said to have landed in southern Hampshire around 495. But the history of Wessex is not as straightforward as it might seem. The main source, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, is filled with stories that mix fact with legend, making it hard to separate truth from myth. The Chronicle tells us that Cerdic and Cynric started their conquest in the Isle of Wight in southern Hampshire, but this version has been questioned by historians. Other sources, like Bede, suggest that these areas were actually Jutish, not Saxon, and only became part of Wessex much later, after King Caedwalla's conquest in the late 680s. Early archaeology in the region, especially in the upper Thames Valley, provides some clues. This area shows signs of Saxon settlement from the early 5th century, with rich burials and exotic goods suggesting it might have been the true birthplace of the West Saxon kingdom. By the 630s, Dorchester-on-Thames was chosen as the site of the first West Saxon bishopric, further supporting this idea. The Chronicle's account of the early kings, particularly Cerdic and Cynric, is unreliable. David Dumville's research suggests that the dates in the Chronicle were artificially extended to make Wessex appear older. According to Dumville, Cerdic's reign likely began around 538, not 495. One of the most significant figures in early Wessex is Cæsar, who ruled in the late 6th century. The Chronicle portrays him as a powerful leader who expanded West Saxon territory, defeating the British and other Saxons. However, the dates and details in the Chronicle are questionable, and some of Cæsar's achievements might have been exaggerated to enhance his legacy. After Sealand, the kingdom saw a period of growth and consolidation under kings like Cynegils, who was converted to Christianity in 635, and Senway. The real high points came with Caedwalla and Ini. Caedwalla, who ruled from 685 to 688, conquered the Jutish territories, and Ini, who ruled from 688 to 726, is known for his law codes and efforts to strengthen the kingdom. The early 8th century saw a series of kings, including Æthelbald, Cuthred, Sigebert, and Coenwulf, who continued to build on the foundations laid by their predecessors. The kingdom faced challenges, but it remained a significant power in southern England. The reign of Beorhtric, 786 to 802, marked the end of an era. His successor, Egbert, would go on to become one of the most important kings in English history, transforming Wessex into a dominant force and paving the way for the greatness of King Alfred. The story of Wessex is a complex one, shaped by the interplay of oral tradition, written records, and archaeological evidence. While the exact details of its early years remain elusive, the legacy of the West Saxons endures as a crucial part of English history. The kingdom's growth from a small Saxon settlement to a major power in the early medieval period is a testament to the resilience and ambition of its leaders and people.